Tuesday Seventh-day Adventists, a revival of original Adventism and ancient Christianity, presents Escape for Thy Life. Good day, this is Brother Medina for Tuesday Seventh-day Adventist, and please let us start with a word of prayer. Gracious loving Father, be with us as we enter into this presentation. Bless everyone that pay attention to what is being said, and help us to be brought back from the jaws of destruction through the threats that adhere towards our security. In Jesus' holy name we pray, with thanksgiving unto Thee. Amen. Well, today we want to talk about the removal of the Buggery laws. Issues concerning the removal of the Buggery laws. And our topic is, in whose interest? In whose interest? You see, my dear people, since the days of Christianity, when Christianity influenced the world, laws were crafted by governments out of Christian teachings, out of Christian morality. Today, in the 21st century, there are a lot of Christian phobia groups. They are afraid of legislation that found its root in Christian morality. They are afraid of that legislation because those legislation make what they do seem clearly wrong before the public. And now a manifestation of Christian phobia is showing itself in efforts to remove some of those laws, which includes the Buggery laws. So, we want you to look at this commentary explaining the real issue concerning the removal of the Buggery laws. What has basically happened here is that a particular individual took the Buggery laws of Trinidad and Tobago to court, using them as an excuse for what caused trauma to him because of his sodomite behavior. He blamed it on the law and took that law to court, hoping to get the judge to strike down the law. No thought was made by him, and from the judgment we have heard, no thought was made by the judge of the symbolic nature of the Buggery laws, that they are meant to restrain a tidal wave of gross immorality and moral decadence from sweeping the land. Just think about Sodomites believing that it is okay to practice sodomy according to the law of the land. And think about them carrying this further by hugging up one another in the streets and kissing one another in the streets, and your 4-year-old child, your 5-year-old child sees this and is told in classes that that type of sexual perversion is normal and is all right. Think about the tidal wave of corruption that will sweep the land. Yet they are seeking to remove such buggery laws that have been restraining evil from coming upon the land and would bring retribution upon all of us. They are afraid of Christian claims that it is wrong for a man to lie with a man. They have Christian phobia. But nevertheless, this is the nature of the case that have been took to the courts. Yes, my dear people.
Yes, my dear people. They start with the buggery laws, but it is only the beginning. They declare that it is only the start of a campaign that will lead Trinidad and Tobago to become decadent in sexual immorality, just like America and other Western nations. Observe how we are being told this is only where they start.
After going full-time into human rights, I thought that alongside of the advocacy that we do around visibility, etc., the legal situation had to be addressed. Most of the homophobic religious organizations and other organizations, and even the man in the street, if they believe that it's illegal, then they feel that they're entitled to discriminate against us. They think the law protects them. And the death threats and other messages, negative messages I've been receiving on social media prove that fact. People are showing their Facebook face and name and making death threats. They feel they're entitled, and that's because of this law. This law entitles them to discriminate. So, for me, changing the law is where everything has to begin. For me, changing the law is where everything has to begin. For me, changing the law is where everything has to begin. For me, changing the law is where everything has to begin.
Yes, my dear people, we must not allow ourselves to be deceived, because sodomites, in their campaign just to remove buggery laws, cover their tracks with beautiful terms. With terms as love, with terms as discrimination, with terms as equality, with terms as inalienable rights and freedoms. They are giving the impression that good things are being denied to them. So look at this clip, which is an example of how they shroud their corruption in beautiful terms.
This law affects anyone, not only LGBT people, but some people have decided that if this law is removed, God will rain his wrath down upon Trinidad and Tobago, because the LGBT people will just have an easier way to spread their agenda and propaganda around the place. What is the LGBT agenda? Well, honestly, it's just to exist, to get the same rights that everybody else has. We're not trying to take over the world, we're not trying to kill anybody, we're not trying to turn anyone gay. We just want to exist. And since people have made it into an LGBT thing, an attack on LGBT people, an attack on homosexuality, an attack on gay people, and an attack on our rights, I guess we have to show that we are out here, we exist, and we deserve rights.
Yes, my dear people, it is not about rights or freedoms. It is not about rights. There is no right to have relations an illegal way
or a wrong way or a way against nature. That is not a right. That is a deviant practice. So let us look at what this clip shows us about some of the arguments they have been using, how those arguments are invalid.
Dealing with the issue of the tendency for deception. And to be able to deal with it, we need truth. Do not allow, and we certainly must not allow anyone to pull wool over our eyes, regardless of where it comes from, whether it is by church leaders, by media personnel, journalists, politicians, or groups of people with their own self-interest. We must search out truth. The Buggery law has been on our books, we know, for a long time. And we're hearing arguments that because it's been there for a long time, it needs to change. Nothing can be changed simply because it's been there for a long time. If there is reason to change, certainly change, but not because of its long standing. So we would have to be removing most of what we have in our Constitution. So is the issue of the law about theft, the law about murder, we could go on about rape, about all of these. They have been there for a long time. The Buggery law is not trampling on the rights of anyone. It is not hindering anyone from receiving or doing what they may want to do unless they are running afoul of the law. So therefore, the issue is not an issue of rights. And those who are pretending that it is rights, it is not about rights, because it is not rights, it is not about stigma, it is wanting to advance a cause with total freedom that will then trample on the rights of others and on the majority, as is being done in most nations in the Western world who have removed it. We have seen it gone down a course. But do understand that no rights are being trampled.
Yes, my dear people, here is real proof of an agenda to actually go all the way to have children practicing sodomy, to teach children about sodomy, to make them become drag queens. Here is clear proof in this actual statement from Human Rights Watch. Look at this. We read this and we show you pictures with it. Listen carefully to what is being said.
The current move to get rid of the Buggery laws in Trinidad and Tobago is not an individual country thing. It is a conspiracy, a plan from Human Rights Watch. Here is what we're told in this document here. Human Rights Watch calls on Caribbean governments to repeal Buggery laws. So you see, it is something that they are seeking to do in all Caribbean countries. Here is what we are told again. International Human Rights Group, Human Rights Watch, is calling on governments in the Eastern Caribbean to repeal all laws that criminalize consensual sexual activity among people of the same sex. And then we are told in a report published on March the 21st, the group said it conducted interviews with gay people in Antigua and Barbuda, Barbados, Dominica, Grenada, St. Kitts and Nevis, St. Lucia and St. Vincent and the Grenadines. The report noted that in all the islands studied, Buggery laws, though not enforced, remain on the books. All 7 countries have versions of Buggery and gross indecency laws, relics of British colonialism. So you see, this clearly shows us that they really want to remove the Buggery laws from all those countries. It is a matter of trying to change the whole Caribbean and bring it more like the United States and Europe with regards to sodomy striving as a right when it isn't a right after all. Yes, my dear people. Here is proof that it is about changing not just only the Buggery laws, but removing other what we call moral standards from society by legislation. It is the same sodomite agenda. Here is proof in their very own document. It states, The group is calling on the governments of the countries studied to repeal all laws that criminalize consensual sexual activity among persons of the same sex. Ensure that criminal laws and other legal provisions are not used to punish consensual sexual activity among persons of the same sex. Now here is the point. Pass laws defining the crime of rape in a gender-neutral way so that non-consensual sex between men or between women is concluded, so that pass laws defining the crime of rape in a gender-neutral way so that non-consensual sex between men or between women is included in the definition and subject to equal punishment. This is what we are being told. Again, we are told, consistent with the principles of non-discrimination, ensure that an equal age of consent applies to both same-sex and different-sex sexual activity. In other words, if you can lower the age of sexual consent, then it could justify pedophile relationships, so that you can have a 40-year-old man having a relationship with a 15-year-old girl or 15-year-old boy, and that can be called normal in society by law when it is actually pedophilia. It goes on again. It tells us, pass comprehensive anti-discrimination legislation that prohibits discrimination, including on the grounds of gender identity and sexual orientation, and includes effective measures to identify, prevent, and respond to such discrimination. So this way, they are bringing in the whole range of 52 or 53 different genders such as butch, whatever that is, and a whole host of others. This is the same sodomite agenda they are asking to be legislated. So they start with the buggery laws, but they will not stop there. They will go on further. And they also speak about sexual orientation. The choice a person has of what sexual practice they want should never be subject to legislation in the sense of any form of legalization. Why is it doesn't take in bestiality and pedophilia? Those are sexual orientations too. But it clearly shows you it is the sodomite agenda that they are seeking for, and they have only started with the buggery laws. It continues. Introduce and implement a gender recognition procedure in accordance with international standards. Notice this, gender recognition procedure in accordance with international standards and good practices to allow people to change their legal gender on all documents through a process of self-declaration that is free of medical procedures or coercion. Notice what they are telling people to do? So that you would have a document that states the person is neither male or female but butch or asexual or transvestite or drag queen as a gender. Those are not genders. But with the false interpretation of gender, they want that to become legal also by law in the country. This clearly shows they are trying to take us the American way, which we have seen already. We are told also, enable LGBT people to undergo needs assessment for their health, including mental health, and develop programming to address those needs. Such assessments should be strictly voluntary, provide options for anonymity and other protections for participants' identities, and be conducted in ways that respect the privacy and dignity of LGBT individuals. So they take a group of people who have sex the wrong way, who have wrong ideas of their gender, and that is a community, and they are calling for the government to give them rights when rights are given by God and not by man. Notice what they're looking for. They are actually looking for rights given to them by man. This is wrong. This is false. God is against such practices, and we know it from the Bible, and the government should not find themselves justifying such falsehood under any pretenses. So it is not just about the removal of buggery laws. That's just only where it begins. But what does God say about all of this? This clip shows us what God says about all of this, and he will send retribution upon nations that justify Christian phobia, corrupt laws. Remember, sodomy is not new, it is archaic. God destroyed the cities on the plain for sodomy. So our laws against buggery is not archaic. The practice of sodomy and what they are seeking to do is archaic, extremely ancient. But God has also shown what he thinks about it. So let us look at what this clip shows us. Yes, my dear people, why do they want the buggery laws to be removed? They want it to be removed to show their sin openly, as the Bible presents it. They want to show their sins openly. Once there are no laws, they think, hindering them, they can openly behave just as Sodom openly behaved. If we look at Isaiah chapter 3 and verse 9, here is what we are told. The show of their countenance doth witness against them, and they declare their sin as Sodom. They hide it not. Woe unto their soul, for they have rewarded evil unto themselves. Yes, my dear people. So, like ancient Sodom and Gomorrah and those cities on the plain, they show their sins openly. It is seen in their countenance. It is seen in their public behavior. That's what they want to do. Why they want the buggery laws removed. But they are bringing a curse upon themselves. And ultimately, since we live in the same small islands with them, we too will suffer when vengeance starts to fall upon them. And this is the reason why the government should not allow any judge to play he's an activist judge to remove a law which is not given by him to do, but only the government legislator can do it. So any judge who thinks he can remove a law that have been there all the time and have been active, he cannot do that. He can make a representation to the government, but ultimately it is the government that must remove the law by an amendment. So no judge, no activist judge has any authority to do such thing. And all these sodomites want, these Christian phobia people want, is to show their sin openly like Sodom. But they are bringing retribution unto themselves. Another argument they use is that it is an inalienable right given to them, that God has given to them inalienable rights. But the point is, the whole country has inalienable rights. And there is no right to have sex the wrong way. There is no right to do it in a way that is not right. There is no right to tell us where or how you do the act. So that cannot be a right. Sexual gratification cannot be a right. One may have the ability to do it, but that is not identified as a right which is given by God. Yet they say inalienable. Do you know what the word inalienable means? Inalienable means outside of humanity, alien to humanity. It means the rights does not come from man. Whom does the rights come from? Rights and freedoms come from God. And if you are saying you have inalienable rights, you are saying you have rights that come from God. All of us have rights that come from God, but no right is how you practice your sexual deviation. No right is how you do your sexual activity. Worse yet, that cannot come from God, because hear what God himself, and I'm not quoting Moses, I'm quoting what God himself says about such practices. In Leviticus chapter 18 and verse 22, we are told, "Thou shalt not lie with mankind as with womankind, it is abomination." Did you see that? That is what God is saying. Therefore, God is saying it is not a right, because you ought not to do such a thing like this. And if we look at Leviticus chapter 20, and we look at verse 13, we see again, if a man also lie with mankind, as he lied with a woman, both of them have committed an abomination. They shall surely be put to death, their blood shall be upon them. I know you will say, well, we are calling for you all to be put to death, but you must remember, this is a law that was given to the nation of Israel, authorized by God to do that in those days. We are not the nation of Israel, Trinidad and Tobago, so we cannot put somebody to death for that. But at least the state cannot give legal sanction to something that God says not to do. And this is why the state shouldn't legalize it. And this is what God says. So it is not an inalienable right. It is not a right coming from God. Rights and freedoms come from God. And this is certainly not a right coming from God. But you know what you are doing? You would bring the retribution of God upon us as small islands where we have nowhere to flee by your corruption. And certainly, God tells us that retribution is going to come. If we look at Jude, the book of Jude, and we look at verse 7, here is what we are told, I quote, even as Sodom and Gomorrah and the cities about them in like manner, giving themselves over to fornication, the word is porneo, meaning all kind of corrupted sex, and going after strange flesh, that is sodomy, are set forth for an example, suffering the vengeance of eternal fire. End of quote. Do you know what it tells us here? They are set forth as an example. So since they are an example of what? Of the retribution, the fire, the tsunamis, the earthquakes, the tornadoes, the great destructions that are soon to come upon the face of this earth, causing millions to die. It is because of sodomy being legalized by nations that this will happen also. Because Sodom and Gomorrah is an example for us. And these people, these Christian phobias who don't believe in the Bible, would want these kind of retributions to come upon us because they don't know better. And because they rather follow their own perverted lusts than follow what the Bible says, which is truth. So may God have mercy on all of us, that we may not give countenance to Christian phobia, sodomite behavior, weakening the morality of the country and destroying the morality of the country. May God have mercy on all of us through Jesus Christ our Savior. Amen.
Finally, it must be considered that the same logic that is appealed to justify the removal of the burglary laws can legally and logically also apply to laws that criminalize bestiality, lying with animals, incest, and even pedophile practices. It's the same logic that can be used. This is a clear sign of where those arguments will go. And even today, in Western societies, they're seeking to justify incest, pedophile practices, and bestiality using the same logic. Moral horror and public outrage for legalizing these evident abominations is weakened when the evident destruction of the burglary laws comes into effect. So when you destroy the burglary laws, you destroy people's hate for these sexual corruptions, and therefore moral corruption will sweep the land like a tidal wave. God is against all of this. And God does not want us to be fooled by those who claim that we are causing them to suffer and beat them up and all these sort of things. Nancy stories, lies, not true. But they're using those things to justify what they're doing. It's the same thing they did in America and other countries, and now they're sweeping the Caribbean, doing it to bring us into destruction when all those tidal waves, tsunami, fire, earthquakes and so on will be taking place. Not only they will die, but a lot of people will die who justify these wrongs. So let us stand for what is right against these wrongs. Let us remember that righteousness exalts a nation, but sin is a reproach to any people. May God bless you as you make the right decisions, as you stand against these things. Let me tell you this, no government law can cause Tuesday, Seventh-day Adventists to cooperate with any of those Christian-phobic, immoral practices, even though it is legal. We will rather go to jail than do this.
And that's where they are going to be sending us. But God is our refuge. God is our strength. And he will deal with them. We give you that assurance. So again, may God bless you until we meet again. In Jesus' holy name, amen.